Repair Clinic encourages you to perform this procedure safely. In this video, we will show one or more of these icons to alert you when to use caution. Before you begin the procedure of removing the carburetor from the engine, make sure the engine has cooled. The ignition switch is in the off position, and the key has been removed, if applicable. If necessary, disconnect the headlight wire harness. Then lift up the hood or engine cover and detach it. Now rotate the air filter cover retaining knobs counterclockwise and pull off the cover. Lift out the air filter. Use a 1/4-inch socket or nut driver to unthread the screw inside the filter housing. Now use a 3/8-inch socket or wrench to unthread the 4 blower housing mounting bolts. Detach the oil drain tube and lift off the blower housing. Use a 7/16" socket to unthread the mounting nuts securing the air inlet pipe. Detach the breather tube and set the pipe aside. Use locking pliers to crimp the fuel line. Release the retaining clamp and pull the fuel line off of the carburetor. Disconnect the solenoid wire harness. Use a 5/16" deep well socket or nut driver to unthread the carburetor mounting bolts. Note the orientation of the linkages, then detach the throttle rod and spring, and release the carburetor from the choke rod. Use a Phillips head screwdriver to unthread the screws, securing the plate to the throttle shaft. Set the plate aside and pull out the shaft. If still intact, remove the old gasket. Install the new throttle shaft gasket by sliding it onto the shaft. Reinsert the shaft into the carburetor. Realign the plate and replace the screws to secure it. Next, use pliers to pull out the choke plate. Remove the shaft and slide off the 2 old gaskets and spring. Now position the new larger gasket over the new spring. Slide the spring and gasket onto the shaft, followed by the new small choke shaft gasket. Reinsert the shaft into the carburetor. Press the shaft down so the spring catches in the notch, then position the choke lever on the stop to maintain tension on the spring. Reinsert the choke plate into the shaft, making sure it can open and close properly. If you feel it's necessary to clean out the main jet passage, first use a small flathead screwdriver to scrape away the Welch plug sealer. Next, use a sharp pin punch and hammer to bore a hole in the Welch plug. Then pry the plug out. After cleaning out the passage, insert the new Welch plug with the beveled edge facing outward. Use a roll pin punch to fully seat the plug. Then apply some non-hardening sealer. Note the position of the idle speed adjustment screw. Then use a Phillips head screwdriver to unthread the screw. Remove the screw and spring. Slide the new spring onto the new screw. Then thread the screw into the carburetor to approximately the same position as the original screw. Next, use the Phillips head screwdriver to remove the screws securing the carburetor bowl. Remove the bowl. Pull out the float pin. Then lift off the float and needle. Pull off the float base and remove the bowl gasket and O-ring. If necessary, you can use carburetor cleaner to clean out the ports. Now position the new O-ring on the float base. Then align the new bowl gasket. Reposition the float base on the carburetor. Replace the old needle on the float with the new needle. Insert the needle in the hole on the float base, align the float, and secure it with the new pin. Replace the bowl and secure it with the screws. Now use a 1/2-inch wrench to help unthread the fuel shutoff solenoid. Remove the old washer and replace it with the new one. Rethread the solenoid into the carburetor. Before you reinstall the rebuilt carburetor, use a 3/8-inch socket to unthread the bolts securing the intake manifold. Detach the manifold and replace the old O-ring with the new one. Reposition the manifold on the engine and secure it with the bolts. Now reattach the carburetor to the choke rod. Attach the throttle rod and spring. Align the new gasket on the intake manifold. Position the carburetor. Then thread the mounting bolts and tighten. Connect the solenoid wire harness. Attach the fuel line to the carburetor. Secure it with the retaining clamp. And remove the locking pliers. Replace the O-ring on the air inlet pipe with the new one. Then align the pipe on the carburetor and secure it with the mounting nuts. Reattach the breather tube to the pipe. Reposition the blower housing. Make sure the housing is properly seated on the air diverter. Rethread and tighten the mounting bolts to secure the housing. The longer bolts go in the back. Replace the screw in the filter housing. Reposition the air filter. Realign the cover and rotate the retaining knobs clockwise to secure. Reattach the oil drain tube to the blower housing. Reinstall the hood or engine cover. And reconnect the headlight wire harness if applicable. Be aware you will probably need to adjust the idle speed adjustment screw with the engine running to properly set the idle.